The coffee maker in the Theta 7 outpost made a strange gurgling sound that Ryan Torres had grown to love over the past 6 months. It was the only familiar noise in a place filled with alien chatter, electronic beeps from species he couldn't pronounce, and the constant hum of life support systems. Designed for 12 different types of beings, Ryan pressed the button and watched the dark liquid flow into his cup. Around him, the morning shift was beginning, though morning and night meant little in space. The Villani crew members were changing colors as they communicated through their skin patterns, flashing blues and greens that meant everything was normal. The insectoid hive delegates moved in perfect synchronization, their forearms working at different control panels while their compound eyes tracked multiple screens at once. "Human Ryan," called Chief Science Officer Kala from across the command center. Her 6 arms were busy with calculations while she spoke. "Your species requires this heated liquid every morning cycle. Is this a religious practice?" Ryan smiled and took a sip. "Not religious. Just necessary for survival." The other crew members found human habits fascinating and weird. They watched him eat 3 times a day instead of absorbing nutrients when needed. They observed his requirement for 8 hours of unconsciousness every day cycle, which they called the human offline period. Most confusing of all, they noticed he did this thing called relaxing, where he would sit still and do nothing productive. Lieutenant Zeph, whose spider-like body allowed him to walk on walls and ceilings, dropped down from an overhead console. "The morning reports show all systems functioning within normal parameters. Shipping traffic is light through sectors 7 and 12. Ryan nodded and settled into his chair at the communications station. Theta 7 was supposed to be the most boring assignment in the Galactic Coalition. They monitored shipping lanes, relayed messages between systems, and filed daily reports that nobody read. The outpost sat at the edge of civilized space, far from any conflicts or interesting events. Dr. Nira floated past in her containment suit, her gaseous form swirling with contentment. The Cloud People were naturally peaceful, and she often commented how much she enjoyed the quiet nature of their assignment. "Beautiful day for observation work," she said in her airy voice. Communications Officer Dell had rooted himself near the main communication array, his plant-like form drawing energy from the station's power grid. His leaves rustled softly as data flowed through the network connections he had grown into the system. "All channels clear and functioning," he reported. Ryan pulled up the daily shipping schedules on his screen. 17 cargo vessels were due to pass through their monitoring zone, along with 2 passenger transports and a coalition patrol ship. Everything was routine and predictable, just the way the crew liked it. The flux being zipped through the corridors is pure energy, their electromagnetic signatures showing up on sensors throughout the station. They were responsible for maintaining the power systems and seemed to enjoy the steady flow of electricity through the outpost circuits. Their presence made the lights flicker occasionally, but it was a comforting sign that everything was working properly. Commander Voss entered the command center, his large reptilian form casting shadows across the floor. His scales were a calm green color, indicating satisfaction with the current state of affairs. "Morning briefing in 10 minutes, he announced. Standard protocols, nothing unusual to report. The title folk were in their specialized quarters, managing the outpost water, recycling, and environmental systems. Their aquatic nature made them excellent at maintaining the complex life support needed for so many different species. Ryan could hear the gentle sound of water flowing through the station's pipes, a sound that reminded him of rain on Earth. The crystalline shard. People communicated through harmonic frequencies that created beautiful music throughout the station. Their song this morning was peaceful and melodic, indicating that all sensor readings were normal and no threats were detected in the surrounding space. Ryan finished his coffee and began reviewing the overnight communications logs. Most messages were routine shipping notifications, weather reports from nearby systems, and administrative updates from Coalition headquarters. One message caught his attention, though it seemed harmless enough. A routine security bulletin about increased radar activity in distant sectors, nothing that would affect their quiet corner of space. The Hexa engineers were performing their weekly maintenance checks, their multiple arms allowing them to work on several systems simultaneously. They took pride in keeping the outpost running smoothly, and their efficiency meant that minor problems were fixed before they became major issues. As Ryan read through the reports, he noticed the pattern that had developed over his months on Theta 7. The alien crew members were incredibly dedicated and efficient, but they also seemed to live in a constant state of controlled anxiety. They monitored everything, calculated risks constantly, and planned for every possible scenario. It was admirable, but exhausting to watch. The Arachne security team was completing their patrol of the station's outer sections. Their 8 legs allowed them to move quickly through the cramped maintenance tunnels, and their multiple eyes could spot problems that others might miss. They reported everything secure and normal. Commander Voss called the crew together for the morning briefing. The 12 different species gathered in the main conference room, each requiring different environmental controls. The temperature was set to accommodate the cold-blooded reptilians, while the atmosphere contained the right mix of gases for everyone's breathing requirements. "Standard day ahead of us," Commander Voss began. "Shipping traffic is normal communication. Channels are clear, and all systems are functioning properly. Any concerns or issues?" The crew members looked at each other, their various forms of communication creating a brief symphony of colors, sounds, and energy patterns. After a moment, they all indicated that everything was fine. Ryan leaned back in his chair and smiled. 6 months ago, he had been worried about fitting in with such a diverse crew. Now their daily routines felt comfortable and familiar. The aliens had accepted his strange human habits, and he had learned to appreciate their unique abilities and perspectives. "Human Ryan," Commander Voss said, "your species seems particularly well suited to this type of monitoring work. You show remarkable calm in routine situations." "Thanks," Ryan replied. "Humans are good at staying relaxed when there's nothing to worry about." As the briefing ended and the crew returned to their duties, Ryan could not have known that this would be the last normal morning they would ever have on Theta 7. By tomorrow, everything would change, and his alien crewmates would discover that humans had another quality that made them unique: the ability to stay calm when there was everything to worry about. The long-range sensors started screaming at 14:27 station time. Ryan was eating lunch when the alarms began, a simple sandwich that had become his favorite meal since arriving at Theta 7. The sound was unlike anything they had heard during their 6 months of peaceful monitoring. Chief Science Officer Kala's 6 arms froze over her control panels as the data streamed across her screens. Her normally calm demeanor shattered as she processed the information. "Commander Voss to the command center immediately," she called over the intercom, her voice shaking. Ryan set down his sandwich and walked to the nearest monitor. The display showed a fleet of ships approaching their sector, but these were not the usual cargo vessels or passenger transports. The sensor readings indicated massive warships with weapon signatures that made his stomach drop. Lieutenant Zeph scuttled across the ceiling at incredible speed, his 8 legs carrying him toward the main tactical display. "Raiders," he clicked through his mandibles. 47 ships, full battle configuration, estimated arrival in 18 hours. The word spread through the station like wildfire. Raiders were the nightmare that kept coalition outposts awake at night. They were a loose confederation of aggressive species who attacked shipping lanes, destroyed peaceful settlements, and showed no mercy to anyone who got in their way. Commander Voss burst into the command center, his scales flashing from green to deep red in seconds. "Confirm the readings," he ordered. Dr. Nira's gaseous form swirled frantically in her containment suit as she ran atmospheric analysis on the approaching ships. "Confirmed," she said, her voice barely controlled. "Multiple species signatures, all known raider configurations. This is not a mistake." The Villani communications team immediately began flashing distress colors across their skin. Their tentacles worked at the communication controls while their bodies displayed rapid patterns of orange and purple. Panic signals within minutes. They were broadcasting emergency calls on every known coalition frequency. Communications Officer Dell's leaves rustled. violently as he extended his root network deeper into the station's systems. His plant-like form was trembling as he tried to establish contact with Coalition fleet commanders, nearby outposts, and anyone who might be able to help them. Nearest Coalition forces are 3 days away, Dell reported, his voice shaking. The patrol ship in Sector 12 is already changing course, but they cannot reach us before the raiders arrive. The flux beings zipped through the corridors at dangerous speeds, their energy signatures spiking with panic. Their electromagnetic pulses were so intense that several non-critical systems began shorting out. Emergency lights flickered throughout the station as their fear manifested in power surges. The crystalline, shard people's harmonic communication turned into a discordant wail that made everyone's ears hurt. Their beautiful music became a soundtrack of terror as they processed the tactical implications of a raider attack on their undefended position. Chief Science Officer Kala was running calculations at a speed that made her arms blur. 47 ships, estimated crew of 1,500 raiders, weapons capable of destroying this station in less than 4 minutes, she announced. Our defensive capabilities, 0. The Hexa engineers were frantically checking evacuation systems, their multiple arms working on different emergency protocols simultaneously. They had never needed to prepare for evacuation before, and several critical systems had not been tested in months. Commander Voss called an emergency meeting in the main conference room. As the crew gathered, their panic was visible in every species-specific way possible. The tidal folk were releasing stress hormones that clouded their water, the arachnae were clicking their mandibles in rapid fear patterns, and the grove people were shedding leaves all over the floor. We have 17 hours and 33 minutes before the raiders arrive, Commander Voss announced. We have 2 evacuation ships with capacity for 8 crew members and 4 escape pods with minimal life support. The mathematical reality hit everyone immediately. 12 crew members, 8 evacuation spots. 4 people would have to take the escape pods, which had no faster-than-light capability and limited supplies. It was essentially a death sentence. Doctor Nira's gaseous form turned darker as she absorbed the implications. The escape pods have only enough life support for 72 hours. Without rescue, anyone using them will die. The crew began talking frantically in multiple languages, their panic creating a cacophony of sounds, colors, and energy patterns. The Hive delegates buzzed in rapid consultation, trying to reach consensus on who should get the evacuation ships. The Villani were flashing distress patterns so rapidly that their skin looked like a strobe light. Lieutenant Zeph was calculating survival probabilities on his personal computer. If we launch the escape pods toward the Coalition patrol ships' position, there is a 12% chance they will be recovered before life support fails. He reported. The room fell silent as everyone processed this information. 12% was better than 0, but not by much. Communications Officer Dell was still trying to reach anyone who might help. I have contacted 17 Coalition facilities, he reported. Emergency response time is still 3 days minimum. No one can reach us before the raiders arrive. Commander Voss looked around the room at his crew. These were good people, dedicated to their duty and loyal to the Coalition. The idea of leaving 4 of them to die was unbearable, but the alternative was letting all 12 be captured, tortured, and killed by raiders. We need to decide who takes the evacuation ships, he said quietly. Priority goes to those carrying critical intelligence and those most vulnerable to raider interrogation. Techniques. The flux beings pulsed with terror at the mention of interrogation. Energy-based life forms were particularly susceptible to raider torture methods. The telepathic species also knew they would be prime targets for information extraction. As the debate continued, Ryan noticed something that his alien crewmates had missed. In their panic, they were making decisions based on fear rather than logic. They were assuming the raiders intended to destroy the station, but raiders were primarily interested in profit and strategic advantage. Where are the raiders headed? Ryan asked quietly. Chief Science Officer Kala checked her calculations. Their trajectory indicates they are using our position as a navigation checkpoint. Their ultimate destination appears to be the New Geneva. Trade hub, Ryan nodded and stood up. I need to think about this, he said. I'm going to my quarters for a while. The alien crew members stared at him in disbelief. Lieutenant Zeph's mandibles clicked rapidly. Human Ryan, we have 16 hours before a raider fleet arrives to kill us all. This is not the time for thinking. Actually? Ryan replied calmly, this is exactly the time for thinking. Panic never solved anything. As he walked toward the door, Dr. Nira called after him, Where are you going? Ryan paused and looked back at his terrified crewmates. I'm going to take a nap. I do my best thinking when I'm asleep. The silence that followed was broken only by the continued wailing of the Shard people and the frantic clicking of the arachne. As the door closed behind Ryan, the crew was left to wonder if the human had finally cracked under pressure, or if there was something about his species they had never understood. Ryan's quarters were the only place on Theta 7 that felt truly human. He had arranged the furniture to remind him of his apartment back on Earth, with a small desk, a comfortable chair, and a bed that actually looked like something a human would. Sleep in. The walls displayed images of Earth landscapes, green forests, and blue oceans that seemed impossible in the metal corridors of the space station. He lay down on his bed and closed his eyes while chaos erupted throughout the station. The sounds of panic echoed through the corridors, alien voices raised in fear and desperation. But Ryan had learned to filter out distractions when he needed to think. Sleep was not just rest for humans, it was when their brains processed complex problems and found creative solutions. Outside his door, the crew was descending further into madness. Commander Voss was trying to maintain order while making impossible decisions about who would live and who would die. The Villani communications team had contacted everyone they could think of, but the responses were all the same. Help was days away, and the raiders would arrive in 15 hours. Chief Science Officer Kala had calculated and recalculated their defensive options dozens of times, but the mathematics never changed. Theta 7 had no weapons, no shields, and no way to escape. Before the raider fleet arrived, her 6 arms were trembling as she worked, something the other crew members had never seen before. Dr. Nira floated through the corridors, checking on crew members who were showing signs of psychological breakdown. The tidal folk had flooded their quarters in stress response, creating a maintenance crisis that added to their problems. The Arachne security team was patrolling obsessively, as if they could somehow prevent the inevitable by walking the same routes over and over. The flux beings were causing power fluctuations throughout the station as their panic manifested in electromagnetic surges. Critical systems were shorting out, and the Hexa engineers were struggling to keep essential functions online. The beautiful harmonic songs of the Shard people had become a continuous wail of terror that made everyone's nerves worse. Lieutenant Zeph had calculated survival probabilities for every possible scenario, and none of them were good. The escape pods had a 12% chance of rescue, but only if everything went perfectly. The evacuation ships could reach Coalition space, but leaving 4 crew members behind felt like murder to everyone involved. Communications officer Dell had grown so many additional routes into the station's network that he was physically integrated with the communication systems. His leaves were dropping constantly as stress took its toll on his plant-like biology. He kept broadcasting distress calls, but the responses were always the same. No help was coming in time. 3 hours into Ryan's nap, the situation became worse. Long-range sensors detected that the raider fleet had increased speed and would arrive 4 hours ahead of schedule. What had been a desperate situation became impossible. Commander Voss made the hardest decision of his career. The crew members, with the most critical intelligence and those most vulnerable to raider torture, would take the evacuation ships. The others would take the escape pods and hope for a miracle. The Hive delegates were selected for evacuation because their shared consciousness contained strategic information about Coalition defenses. The Flux beings were chosen because raiders had developed particularly cruel methods for torturing energy-based life forms. Chief Science Officer Kala would go because her knowledge of Coalition technology was too valuable to lose. That left Commander Voss, Dr. Nira, Lieutenant Zeph, Communications Officer Dell, and Ryan for the escape pods. 5 people, 4 pods. Someone would have to stay behind and face the raiders alone. As the evacuation ships prepared to launch, several crew members suggested leaving Ryan behind. He seemed unaware of the danger, and if he would not wake up to save his own life, perhaps he was not worth saving. The human had always been strange, but this level of detachment seemed pathological. Dr. Nira refused to abandon any crew member, regardless of species. She floated outside Ryan's quarters and used her atmospheric manipulation abilities to test the air inside his room. The readings showed normal human sleep patterns, which baffled her even more. How could anyone sleep when death was approaching? Lieutenant Zeph tried accessing the door controls to force entry, but Ryan had activated privacy locks that required command authorization to override. Even in sleep, the human had somehow anticipated and prevented their intervention. Commander. Voss stood in the corridor outside Ryan's quarters, his scales shifting through colors that indicated profound confusion and frustration. In his decades of military service, he had never encountered a soldier who responded to mortal danger by taking a nap. The evacuation ships launched with their 8 passengers, leaving 5 crew members to face the approaching raider fleet. The ships had barely cleared the station's docking bay when their faster-than-light drives engaged, carrying them to safety while their colleagues prepared to die. With 13 hours remaining before the raiders arrived, the 4 remaining conscious crew members gathered in the command center to make their final preparations. They would upload critical data to the escape pod's computers, destroy sensitive information, and prepare the station for evacuation. We need to wake the human, Commander Voss decided. He deserves to know what is happening, even if he chooses to sleep through his own death. Dr. Nira used her command codes to override Ryan's privacy locks. The door slid open to reveal the human sleeping peacefully, his breathing slow and regular. He looked completely relaxed, as if he was safe in his childhood bedroom instead of hours away from being killed by space pirates. "Human Ryan," Commander Voss called loudly. "Wake up, we need to evacuate immediately." Ryan's eyes opened slowly, and he sat up with the casual movements of someone who had enjoyed a restful nap. He looked around at his alien crewmates, noting their obvious distress and the emergency lighting that was flashing throughout the station. "How long was I asleep?" he asked, stretching like he had just woken up on a lazy weekend morning. 6 hours, Lieutenant Zeph clicked frantically. "The raiders will be here in 13 hours. We have 4 escape pods for 5 people. Someone has to stay behind." Ryan nodded thoughtfully and stood up. Has anyone considered that maybe running away is not the best solution to this problem? The 4 aliens stared at him in amazement. Dr. Nira's gaseous form swirled with confusion. "Human Ryan, there are 47 raider ships approaching. We have no weapons and no defenses. What alternative do you see?" Ryan walked to his small desk and picked up a tablet, scrolling through information he had downloaded before his nap. "I spent some time thinking about our situation. The raiders are not coming here to destroy us. They need this station intact for their real mission." He showed them the tactical analysis he had been working on. They are using Theta 7 as a navigation checkpoint for their attack on New Geneva. They need our computers and communication systems to coordinate their assault. That means they will try to capture the station, not destroy it. Commander Voss looked at the data and felt a spark of hope for the first time in hours. If they need the station intact, perhaps we have more options than we realized. Ryan smiled and walked toward the command center. "While you were all panicking, I was thinking, and now I have a plan." The command center felt different when Ryan entered it with purpose instead of routine. The emergency lighting cast strange shadows across the alien technology, and the constant alarms created an atmosphere of impending doom. But Ryan moved through it all with the calm confidence of someone who had solved a difficult puzzle. He sat down at the main tactical console and began pulling up system schematics that most crew members never saw. His security clearance as a coalition officer gave him access to the station's deepest functions, areas that were normally restricted to prevent accidental damage. "What are you doing?" Dr. Nira asked, her gaseous form swirling with nervous energy. "I am preparing a welcome party for our visitors," Ryan replied, his fingers moving quickly across the control panels. "The raiders expect to find either a heavily defended position or an abandoned station. They will be prepared for resistance or emptiness, but not for what I have in mind." Commander Voss watched as Ryan accessed the station's power distribution network. "Human Ryan, even if you have a plan, there are still 47 raider ships, with 1,500 warriors. How can one human stand against such a force?" Ryan paused in his work and looked at his alien colleagues. "You are thinking like military officers, trying to match force with force. But sometimes the best solution is not to fight the enemy, but to make the enemy fight themselves." He returned to his modifications, explaining his plan as he worked. The station's main computer systems were connected in a network that the raiders would need to access to coordinate their attack on New Geneva. Ryan was modifying that network to create what he called a feedback trap. "The raiders will connect their systems to our computers to download navigation data and establish communication links," he explained. "But when they do, they will trigger a cascade failure that will overload both their systems and ours." Lieutenant Zeff clicked his mandibles nervously. "You are going to destroy the station?" "Not destroy," Ryan corrected. "Disable. The power feedback will shut down all systems without causing permanent damage. The raiders will be stranded here without communication, navigation, or the ability to coordinate their attack." Communications Officer Dell's leaves rustled with understanding. "Without coordination, their fleet will be scattered and confused. The individual ships will not know what to do or where to go." Ryan nodded and continued his modifications. He was rerouting power conduits, installing new software protocols, and creating backup systems that would activate after the main network failed. It was delicate work that required precise timing and extensive knowledge of both Coalition and Raider technology. "This plan requires someone to stay behind and activate the trap when the raiders board the station," Commander Voss observed. "It is a suicide mission, not suicide," Ryan replied calmly. "Difficult but not impossible. Someone needs to be here to make sure the raiders connect to the right systems and trigger the feedback at the right moment. That someone is me." Dr. Nira's form darkened with concern. "Human Ryan, even if your plan works, you will be trapped on the station with 1,500 angry raiders. They will kill you when they realize what you have done." Ryan finished installing a new subroutine in the communication array and turned to face his crewmates. "Maybe they will, maybe they will not. But if my plan works, their attack on New Geneva will fail, and millions of innocent people will be saved." "That seems like a good trade." The four aliens looked at each other, their various forms of communication creating a brief symphony of colors, sounds, and energy patterns. They were beginning to understand that humans approach problems differently than other species. But Ryan's willingness to sacrifice himself was still difficult to comprehend. "We cannot leave you here alone," Commander Voss decided. "If you stay, we all stay." Ryan shook his head firmly. "No, your job is to survive and report what happens here. The Coalition needs to know about the feedback trap technique in case they face similar situations in the future." He handed Commander Voss a data chip containing complete specifications for the modifications he had made. "This information is more valuable than my life? Make sure it reaches Coalition Command." Lieutenant Zeff was running calculations on his personal computer. "The escape pods can be configured to accommodate 4 passengers if we remove non-essential equipment. We can all fit if we make some adjustments." Ryan spent the next hour helping his crewmates prepare the escape pod for their journey. His knowledge of human engineering principles allowed him to reconfigure the pod's interior space more efficiently than the aliens could manage alone. He also loaded the pod with supplies and equipment they would need to reach the Coalition patrol ship. As they worked, Ryan explained the finer details of his plan. The feedback trap would activate automatically when the raiders attempted to access the navigation computers. But someone needed to be present to ensure they connected to the right systems. More importantly, someone needed to monitor the timing to prevent the cascade from destroying the station completely. The power overload will disable all systems for approximately 6 hours, he explained. After that, emergency power will restore basic life support and communication. I will use that window to signal the Coalition fleet and provide tactical information about the scattered raider ships. Dr. Nero was analyzing Ryan's biological readings with her atmospheric sensors. Your stress levels are remarkably low for someone facing almost certain death. Is this normal human behavior? Ryan smiled as he helped secure equipment in the escape pod. Humans have a saying, do not worry about things you cannot control. I cannot control whether the raiders will kill me, but I can control whether my plan succeeds. So I focus on what I can control. Communications Officer Dell had grown temporary. Routes into the escape pod's communication system, allowing him to maintain contact with the station until they were safely away. I will monitor Coalition frequencies and relay any important information to you. He'd promised Dot with 10 hours remaining before the raider fleet arrived. Ryan finished his preparations and helped his crewmates into the escape pod, the 4 aliens. Barely fit in the modified space, but they would survive the journey to the Coalition patrol ship. Commander Voss was the last to enter the pod. He looked back at Ryan with respect and sadness. Human Ryan, your species is remarkable. I have never met anyone who could remain so calm in the face of certain death. I am not facing certain death, Ryan corrected. I am facing an uncertain outcome with reasonable chance of survival. There is a difference. As the escape pod launched and disappeared into space, Ryan returned to the command center to make his final preparations. He activated the feedback trap protocols, set up monitoring systems to track the raider approach, and prepared the station to look abandoned when they arrived. Then he went back to his quarters, set an alarm for 8 hours, and went to sleep again. When the raiders arrived, they would find a human who had taken a nap while preparing to outsmart an entire fleet of space pirates. The trap was set, and Ryan Torres was ready to prove that sometimes the most dangerous weapon in the galaxy was a human who refused to panic. Ryan woke up to the sound of metal grinding against metal as the raider boarding pods attached to Theta 7's hull. His internal clock told him he had slept for exactly 8 hours, which meant the enemy fleet had arrived right on schedule. He stretched, got out of bed, and made himself a cup of coffee while the raiders cut through the station's outer airlock. The sound of boots and claws echoed through the corridors as the boarding party spread throughout the station. Ryan could hear them calling to each other in various alien languages, their voices filled with the aggressive confidence of predators who had found easy prey. They expected resistance or emptiness, but instead they found a fully operational station with all systems running normally. Ryan sat in his quarters, sipping his coffee and listening to the raiders search the station. They were thorough and professional, checking every room and corridor for hidden defenders or booby traps. Their equipment scanned for life signs, energy signatures, and concealed weapons, but they found nothing except one human sitting calmly in his bedroom. The door to Ryan's quarters exploded inward as a raider demolition team blasted through the reinforced metal. 3 heavily armed aliens entered, their weapons trained on the human, who sat at his desk drinking coffee as if nothing unusual was happening. The lead raider was a massive creature covered in metallic spines, with 4 arms that each held a different type of weapon. His species was known for their brutality and their complete lack of mercy toward prisoners. Behind him stood 2 smaller raiders, insectoid beings whose natural armor was supplemented with mechanical enhancements. Where are the others? The lead raider demanded in broken Coalition standard. Ryan finished his coffee and stood up slowly, his movements calm and unthreatening. They evacuated when your fleet was detected. I stayed behind to maintain the station's systems. The raiders looked at each other in confusion. In their experience, Coalition personnel either fought desperately or fled immediately when faced with overwhelming force. They had never encountered someone who simply stayed at their post and waited for capture. You are human, the lead raider observed, studying Ryan with 4 different eyes. Your species has reputation for violence and unpredictability. Why do you not resist? Ryan shrugged. Resistance would be pointless. You outnumber me 1,500 to 1, and I have no weapons. I prefer to cooperate and hope for reasonable treatment. This response baffled the raiders even more. They escorted Ryan to the command center, where their technical teams were already working to access the station's computer systems. The sight of dozens of alien warriors filling the normally peaceful space would have terrified most beings, but Ryan appeared completely relaxed. The raider commander was a different species than the boarding team leader, a serpentine being whose scales shifted colors to indicate his emotional state. Currently, those scales showed the deep red of suspicion and anger. "Human," the commander hissed. "Your crew abandoned this station, but they left all systems running and you remained behind. This is not normal behavior. What trap have you prepared for us?" Ryan looked genuinely puzzled. "Trap? I'm just one human with no weapons and no military training. What kind of trap could I possibly prepare against a fleet of 47 warships?" The commander studied Ryan carefully, searching for signs of deception or hidden knowledge. But the human's biological readings showed no stress, no elevated heart rate, and no indication that he was lying. His calm demeanor was either the result of severe psychological damage or genuine innocence. "We need navigation data for the new Geneva system," the commander explained. "Your station's computers contain detailed shipping routes and defensive positions. My technical teams will extract this information, and then we will decide what to do with you." Ryan nodded helpfully. "The main navigation computers are in the central processing unit. Your team should be able to access everything they need from the primary terminals." The Raider technical teams were already working at those terminals, their equipment interfacing with the station's systems exactly as Ryan had predicted. They were downloading shipping schedules, defensive configurations, and patrol routes that would allow their fleet to attack New Geneva with devastating effectiveness. As the data transfer proceeded, Ryan sat quietly in a chair near the command center's main display. The raiders ignored him, assuming he was harmless, and focused on their technical objectives. They had no idea that every byte of data they downloaded was triggering the feedback trap he had so carefully prepared. The cascade began slowly, with minor fluctuations in the power grid that the raider technicians attributed to normal system stress. But as they accessed more data and connected more of their equipment to the station's network, the feedback loop grew stronger and more unstable. "Power fluctuations in sectors 7 through 12, one of the raider technicians reported. "Compensating with auxiliary systems." Ryan watched the power readings on the main display, mentally tracking the cascade's progress. The feedback was building exactly as he had calculated, spreading through both the station's systems and the raider equipment connected to them. In approximately 3 minutes, the overload would reach critical levels. "Commander," another technician called out, "we are experiencing interference with our communication links to the fleet. The station's transmitters are generating some kind of jamming field." The Serpentine commander's scales shifted to a darker red as suspicion grew. "Shut down the station's communication array and use our own equipment." "We tried, sir," the technician replied. "Our systems are integrated with the station's network." "For data transfer?" "We cannot disconnect without losing the navigation information." Ryan allowed himself a small smile. The raiders were trapped by their own greed. They needed the station's data, but accessing that data was triggering the cascade. That would destroy their ability to use it. The power fluctuations were becoming more severe, causing lights to flicker throughout the station. The raider equipment was starting to malfunction as feedback surges damaged their circuits. Several technicians were working frantically to stabilize their systems, but they did not understand what was happening. "Something is wrong," the boarding team leader growled, his metallic spines extending in an aggressive display. "The human is too calm. No prisoner should be this relaxed while their captors work." The commander looked at Ryan with growing suspicion. "Human, you show no fear, no distress, no concern for your own survival. This is not natural behavior for a prisoner facing torture and death." Ryan met the commander's gaze calmly. "I told you, resistance is pointless. I am cooperating fully with your requests." "What more do you want from me?" "I want the truth," the commander hissed. What have you done to our systems? Before Ryan could answer, the cascade reached critical mass. Every power conduit in the station overloaded simultaneously, creating a feedback surge that traveled through the network into every piece of Raider equipment connected to it. The lights went out, the artificial gravity failed, and emergency alarms began screaming throughout the station. In the darkness, Ryan heard the sounds of Raider equipment exploding, alien voices shouting in panic, and the distinctive whine of overloaded power systems shutting down. The feedback trap had worked perfectly, disabling both the station and the Raider fleet in one coordinated surge. Emergency lighting activated after several minutes, casting an eerie red glow over the command center. The Raider technicians were staring at their dead equipment in shock and disbelief. Their computers were fried, their communication systems were silent, and their connection to the fleet had been severed. The commander's scales had turned black with rage as he realized what had happened. "You did this," he accused, pointing at Ryan with a clawed finger. "You sabotaged our mission." Ryan stood up slowly, brushing dust from his uniform. "I modified the station's power grid to create a feedback loop. When your equipment interfaced with our systems, it triggered a cascade failure that disabled everything. Your fleet is now scattered and unable to communicate or navigate effectively." The boarding team leader raised his weapons, but the commander stopped him with a gesture. "How?" he demanded. "You are one human against 1,500 raiders. How could you possibly plan such a thing? While your scouts were detecting our position and your fleet was approaching, my crewmates were panicking and preparing to evacuate," Ryan explained, "but I took a nap instead. During that time, my brain processed the tactical situation and developed a solution." The raiders stared at him in amazement. The concept of sleeping to solve problems was completely alien to their way of thinking. They understood aggression, violence, and direct confrontation, but not the idea that unconsciousness could be a strategic advantage. "You slept while preparing to face a raider fleet?" the commander asked in disbelief. "Humans do their best thinking when they are relaxed," Ryan replied. "Panic clouds judgment and leads to poor decisions. Sleep allows our subconscious minds to work on complex problems without interference from fear or stress." The station's emergency power was gradually restoring basic systems, but the main computers remained offline. The raiders were stranded, without navigation, communication, or the ability to coordinate their attack on New Geneva. Their mission had failed completely because one human had taken a nap at the right time. "The Coalition fleet will arrive in approximately 18 hours, Ryan informed them. "I suggest you use this time to consider surrender terms. Your ships are scattered and helpless, and you have no way to escape before help arrives." The commander's scales shifted through several colors as he processed this information. The raiders had gone from overwhelming victory to total defeat in a matter of minutes, all because they had underestimated a single human who refused to panic. 6 months later, Ryan Torres was promoted to admiral and placed in charge of defensive strategy for the entire coalition border. His technique of using feedback traps against superior forces became standard training at military academies throughout known space. The alien species of the coalition finally understood that humans possessed a unique advantage in warfare, the ability to remain calm under pressure and find creative solutions when conventional tactics failed. The most dangerous human was not one who fought with weapons or technology, but one who could take a nap in a war zone and wake up with a plan to save the galaxy. And whenever young coalition officers asked how they could develop such remarkable calm under fire, their instructors would tell them the story of the human who faced 1,500 raiders with nothing but a cup of coffee and a good night's sleep.